You are listening to the East Coast Sisterhood podcast, where women are inspired, encouraged, and loved. If you are a woman, you are sisterhood.
Hello, I'm your host, Jeanne Terry. We know you have a choice in which podcast to listen to, and we thank you for tuning into this one. I'm here to tell you that you are in for a special insider treat. Today, I have the honor of discussing and sharing with you popular trends in macrame. No, seriously, I'm so kidding. Lucky for you all, I know nothing about macrame, or if it's even popular or trending. If you are listening and you are an amazing macrameer and you are macrameing as you're listening, can you please macrame us something for our upcoming women's conference? Because that's what we're really talking about today. Flourish. Flourish Refined is our women's conference that will be taking place at our very own Merritt Island campus on October 11th and 12th, which is on a Friday and Saturday. And that's why I have in the studio with me today a very special guest, our very own Pastor Jessica Stallbaum. Pastor Jessica co-leads our Vieira campus with her husband, Pastor Matt Stallbaum. They have 3 children and a dog named Denver that drives Jessica cray-cray. Jessica enjoys her coffee black and reads so many books that one day she just might be in the Guinness Book of World Record for the greatest number of books ever read in a single year. This girl can read, y'all, and thank God for that, because then she shares all the wisdom she has learned with us. She is also one of the speakers at the Women's Conference. Today she's going to talk to you and me about all things Flourish Refined. Welcome, Jessica. It's an honor to have you here today.
Thank you, Jeanne. It is so great to be here.
Jessica, I would like you to please take us all the way back to what we know as the beginning of sisterhood. I say way back, but it's only 3 years ago, right?
Yeah, 3 years.
Yeah, you started the women's ministry at our Vieira campus and named it Sisterhood. Many listeners may remember the rollout party where you launched the vision. But when did it take birth in you? Was it years in the making? Was it to serve a need in our church? Can you please take us back there to when you were vision casting for the Sisterhood launch party and what sisterhood even means?
Oh my gosh, Jeanne. So that is like 5 questions in one. And so much, it's like, where do you start? Sisterhood has definitely been years in the making. And I guess I'll give you a brief background for those who don't know me. When I married my husband, Matt, I became a pastor's wife just in the simple act of marrying him because he was already a pastor. So I didn't feel like pastor's wife was a specific calling that I had on my life. It was more like I felt called to marry him and be a support to him behind the scenes and even next to him when he made me be next to him, as long as he didn't make me ever talk in front of anyone. Like I was great with one-on-one conversation, but even doing something like this, like talking on a mic, even in a studio, even though there's only 4 people in this room right now, would not have happened. Like, no way. But he knew that when he married me. He knew that getting into this. I didn't keep that a secret and be like, hey, surprise, I'm never talking in a mic on stage ever. I told him that from the beginning. And I said, I will only marry you if you leave me alone and let me not do stuff like that because it terrified me. But he always made it known that anything that I felt called to do, like he was completely on board with it and he would support it. And every once in a while he'd be like, do you want to do that? And I'd be like, no, still no, you know. But I remember this moment like it was yesterday. I was sitting in our kitchen in our house in Rockledge and we had just moved in. I was sitting on an IKEA stool next to our refrigerator.
Very descriptive.
It's so weird how you remember like these very specific things about defining moments in your life. But Matt had just come home from work. We had just, like I said, moved. We'd also just launched our Vieira campus of East Coast Christian Center. So it was probably 2012. I had a newborn and a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old. So we just moved. We launched a church and I was homeschooling and I had a new baby. And so it was in this state of mind, right? Like I'm already nervous about stepping out there and getting out of my comfort zone, yet I have all of this on my plate as well. And my husband says, we really need to create some community in this new church that we've just planted. Like, we need to have some small groups. Like, we didn't have any plans for any of that. He's like, what do you think about starting a women's small group? And I'm sure I just, like, death ray glared him, you know, like, are you kidding me right now? And then he proceeds to go on and be like, it'd be so easy. You just like gather some women and talk to them. And I'm like, no. Like that's easy to you. And that may be easy to other people, but that is not easy to me at all. Because at that point, I did not consider myself a leader at all. And I did not want to talk in front of people, even in a small group. Like it terrified me. So long story short, a couple years after that conversation, Darlene Parton, who's one of our guest speakers for Flourish this year. I'm super excited about that, and we'll talk about her in a minute. But she also used to be my husband's youth pastor, along with her husband, Pastor Eric, when Matt was in high school. She called me out of the blue and invited me to go to a conference in Austin, Texas with her. And I had no idea what the conference was about. I didn't even know who was speaking. I didn't know the theme or anything. And but I said yes because Darlene is super fun and I love traveling and I love conferences. So I'm like, this is great. This is a win-win. I get to like get out of Florida for a little bit, go to Texas, have some brisket, barbecue.
Like, love your brisket.
Yeah, I do. I really do. Those were the things on my mind. So I make my way to Austin. I meet Darlene there at this church, and I'm sitting in the conference, and the theme of the conference flashes on the screen, and it says, "A Time to Rise Up." I can still feel like the feeling I felt in my stomach when I saw that on the screen, because I felt like someone had punched me in the gut, but not in like a I'm going to throw up way, but in a this is for you way. Like the Holy Spirit was like, this is for you. You are here for a purpose. And at that moment, I knew everything in my life was going to change. I didn't know what, I didn't know why, I didn't know how. I just knew I was about to get launched out of my comfort zone, and it was really a moment that I needed to be obedient to God. And so I came home from Austin and told Matt about the experience, and I said, I don't know what this means, but I feel like I remember I was so dramatic about it. I feel like I'm supposed to do the announcements with you at church. He's like, now some people would be like, that is not a big deal. You stand on the stage and you read from a script for like less than a minute. And this was something that he'd asked me to do prior to. So when I came back and I told him, maybe I'm supposed to do this, he knew it was like a big thing. He knew something big had happened in Texas, which is so apropos, right? Like, isn't everything bigger in Texas?
I think you're right, Jessica.
I think it is. So
everything's bigger in Texas.
It is. So big things happened in Texas. I started doing announcements with him. I felt like I was going to throw up every time. Sometimes I still do when I get on stage. I just feel like nauseous and unqualified and all of those things. But Cindy Holzberger, actually, a lot of the people listening will know who she is. But she is such an encourager, and she goes to the Vieira campus. And every time that I was scheduled to do the announcements or do anything on stage, I would go find her before. And I would she knew. I would like beeline to her. She'd grab my hands. She'd look me in the eye, and she'd say something like, Jessica, you are called to do this. Put on your big girl panties and get up there. And she's so great. And I needed that, and I still need that. I love Cindy. That hasn't changed very much. So fast forward just a tiny bit after that trip to Austin, I got home and, I'm doing announcements. I'm getting a little more brave. I'm just trying to be obedient. And I get this random call from Sarah Wood. And again, people will know her for the most part, and you'll see her at Flourish. But Sarah and I had known each other because she and her husband met at the Mezzanine, which is the young adult church that my husband started back in 2001 or 2, which is also where I met him. And so Sarah and Sam met at the Mezzanine, and we had known them probably for a good 8 to 10 years at this point. But we had never been anything more than acquaintances. Like, we had never hung out outside of church. I was surprised she had my number, and I saw her name like flash on my phone, and I'm like, I'm surprised I have her name in my phone. Like, it was just so random. And side note, when you're in ministry and people call you that don't normally call you, it's either good or bad. There's no in between, usually, typically. It's like, yay, something's happening, I'm getting married or I'm having a baby, or my life is falling apart and I'm getting divorced. Like, those are the kind of calls that Matt and I get, like, very often. So I'm, like, bracing myself as I'm answering the call, and I'm like, what does Sarah need? Like, what is going to happen here? And it was very simple, and it was just one of those rare moments where it's just something that's kind of in the middle of, it's not great, it's not bad, it's just, like, a question. So she said, I just had a thought about, what do you think about starting a Facebook group for the women at our Vieira campus? So she used to lead MOPS Beachside, which is Mothers of Preschoolers, and she said that she found that women really connected over this Facebook group that she started for MOPS, and she thought, what a great way for women at our new East Coast Vieira campus to connect. So she said, why don't just it's no rush, like just ask Matt and see what he thinks and see what you think. I thought I'd submit it to you guys. So I got off the phone and I asked Matt, and he goes, you guys should start that like today. So I was like, okay. So I called her back and I told her what he said, and she's like, oh, I thought it's going to be like months down the road or whatever. Okay, I'll get on it right now and start it today. So we did. And we were like, what should we call it? East Coast Women. So creative. Sarah and I are not known for our creativity. We knew from the start, though, with this thing that we were not interested in making this a women's quote unquote ministry, how you would typically think of women's ministry. We we felt like women needed to connect with the church and get plugged in and serving. And we knew that's where they would find community and belonging. So we wanted to be a funnel from the very beginning, a funnel to the church and not a silo like next door to the church. We didn't want this like sideways energy where we're just women over here in this thing doing our own thing. We wanted to, yes, connect women and have them know that they have a place, but like your place is in the church. Like there's leadership opportunities for you in the church. So that's how that kind of started. I don't remember how long it was after that, but Sarah and I and a group of girls went to Shine. Were you there? Did you go on that
Not
trip?
the first one.
Okay. I went to a Shine conference in Jacksonville. Pastor Carrie Weems and Stovall are the pastors of that church. And that was a conference that had been going on for several years. And I would go as I could. It's only 2 hours north. And so I just love, Christine Kane was this guest speaker sometimes. And I just love going anywhere she is. So that particular year that we went, Carrie was releasing a book called The Sisterhood Effect. And she had just written it, just had it published, and handed everyone a copy, and then spoke about it in one of her sessions. And I remember very clearly, like exactly where I was. Sarah and I were not sitting next to each other during that session, but we talked later and we said we just knew that this movement called sisterhood that Bobby Houston, actually is a female pastor in Australia, had started maybe 20 or 30 years ago, and it's kind of just been making its way across the oceans to America. And we started seeing all these other churches kind of adopting sisterhood as their women's identity for their ministry. And so Carrie talked about it very much being a movement, and it just really resonated with us. And to be honest, when I had heard the name sisterhood before, I thought it was very like kitschy and corny. And so I kind of shied away from like thinking, so that's why we were like East Coast women, that's better. But then it was that moment that it was like, okay, this means more than just a name. It's a part of a movement, and it's bigger than us, and it's even bigger than our church. And I feel like we need to be a part of this. So a few months after that, we went to a Propel conference in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And on our flight there, we were talking about, what God had spoken to us at this Shine conference, and should we make the jump from East Coast women to sisterhood and like change it and maybe rebrand it and relaunch it. And as we were talking, we just started talking about what would that look like in the context of East Coast. And so we on that flight, we were sitting in the back row right by the bathrooms. God just downloaded like 5 different values that we felt like really were important to our heart, but more important to God's heart for the women at East Coast. And so those are all on our Instagram, our East Coast Sisterhood Instagram. If you want to, there's like the value, and then there's a paragraph, and there's a verse with each one. So I love just going back and reading them and just knowing that those are God's words for the girls of our house. But I have them here.
Great. Great.
The first one is she loves the house of God. And then the next one is she embraces her feminine role. She acknowledges her God-given potential. She is irreplaceable. And then the last one is she knows her worth. So with that, and with these words and this vision that God gave us, we launched Sisterhood as not the women's ministry of East Coast, but we've always called it our identity, because it's as simple as this. You asked me what sisterhood is, and it is, if you are a woman, you are sisterhood. It's not about what we do. It's about who we are and who God has created us to be. So in a really big nutshell.
That is one big nutshell.
It is.
You must have got that from Texas. No, that's really good. I just love that it's not about who or what we do. It's really about who we are. It's an identity. And I love how you touch on identity. And you even touch on your identity and how you told Matt you would never do these things and just leave me alone. I just want to be in the background. I'll help you and do whatever you want to do. But then you just took a step of faith. Yeah. And then, from going to the conference with Darlene to telling Matt you wanted to do the announcements, and then Sarah, suggesting the Facebook page. And it's like I said, this has been 3 years in the making, and it's just been so much in such a short amount of time. We're super, super proud that you've allowed us to be part of this journey with you.
Oh my gosh, please. It's an honor.
So I do hope that, women who are listening can relate on a new level to what the heart of sisterhood truly is.
Yeah.
This is the 3rd women's conference you've hosted here, Jessica, at this campus. Prior to that, you led 6 Propel women events at our Viera campus. And I know that I have personally been blessed, and countless other women have been blessed by either being a part of them or attending them or both. So what's on your heart about women's events?
I did not set out to host women's conferences. I certainly, like I shared, did not set out to speak at any of them. I really feel like my journey has been one obedient step at a time. And you mentioned a few of them, just saying yes to the conference, saying yes to God when he very clearly said it's a time to rise up. And I know that that impacted other women who were there too, but felt so personal to me. And it felt like after it's a time to rise up was the thought, but it has nothing to do with you. You rising up is going to enable other women to see you rise up, and that it's going to help them rise up as well. And so my obedience, I think, is just connected to other people's breakthrough. And I've always been like, listen, you know my story. If I can do it, you can do it. Like, that's what I want people to get from it, is like, I am the least qualified person. I don't have any confidence in my own ability. But I know that God does. And I know that he has plans for me, and he has plans for you too. And so that's always been kind of the why behind it and my heart behind these events. So it's not just doing an event to do an event. And that's why sisterhood is not about what we do. It's not about the event. It's about who we are and who God is shaping us to be through these events, and through working together to put on these events, and through all the refining that happens in our own lives as we trust God and trust him to give us everything, all the inspiration and all the ideas and all the provision and all of that. But it's just saying yes to God one step at a time. So starting that Facebook page, saying yes to the announcements, all those things. But I will say, had God shown me a picture 3 years ago of this, me and you talking on this podcast, I would have run for sure. Yeah, definitely.
I think that's why God's grace is so good. He's so gentle. He just gives us one glimpse, a little picture at a time. Because like you said, had you seen us sitting here doing a podcast right now, you'd be like, no, nope, I'm good, I'm good.
Exactly.
So thank God he doesn't give us the whole picture.
I know.
A lot of times.
I'm grateful.
Even though we want it and we ask for it. So I just want to know, what motivates you to bring these events to women in our community? I mean, this is a lot of work. You don't just one day wake up and think, I'm going to put on a women's conference. Or do you?
Oh, no, you don't. Well, I don't. Maybe other people do, but I don't. Again, obedience motivates me first and foremost. But what really motivates me beyond that is I know that women find God through these events. And that is the sole purpose. As a Christian, our whole purpose should be to reflect Jesus and to point people towards him. And I know that people discover God through these conferences. Where you're going to do an episode with Jackie Bowner, who is lead of our decor. And women actually discover God because they see the decor and the care that is put in to the decor of each conference, and there's something anointed about it, and like they see it and they think, I can't believe they did this for me, and they open their hearts to God. And so every facet of this conference is meant to touch the heart of a woman who's coming. And so we know, it keeps me going just thinking about the women that I know their countenances have changed. Like I can think of one particular girl who was coming to Propel at the high school and really just looked like a shell of a person. And to see her now as knowing the identity that she has not only in Christ, but as sisterhood, and knowing that she's a part of something bigger than just her, knowing that she belongs and she is accepted. She's a new person. Like I don't even recognize her face anymore for how she is now. So those are the things that that keep me going and motivate me for sure.
That's so good, Jessica. Do you have any scripture you're believing in and standing on when you plan these events?
Yeah, Ephesians 2:10 is a big one for me, and it is, for we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. And when I read this, I just think God knew before I was born that I would be doing what I'm doing today. And this was prepared for me. And I want other women to know that they have things prepared for them as well, and that we are all called to be leaders. Like I very clearly did not understand that I was a leader. And even as like, I don't say you're called to lead women's conferences and you're called to do this. Like I honestly don't wish that on you. It is a lot of work. But I will say that you are called to be a leader in your home, and you're called to be a leader at church and in the place that you work and in the community, even if all you can wrap your mind around is that leadership moment as you are called to lead people to Jesus.
Right.
And if it's even as basic as that, as a believer, we have to know that that is one of our highest calling is to lead other people to him. And that therefore makes you a leader. And so wrapping my mind around that was huge for me. And it really propelled me into wanting other women to understand that as well. So that verse is like, God has things for us that we have no idea, let me tell you.
Absolutely not. I mean,
His ways are not our ways.
No.
Yeah.
I like that. For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand, that we should walk in them. Ephesians 2:10. I love that you invite God in the planning. I mean, he's the whole reason you're doing it. So to keep him the main thing is just refreshing to hear that. So you're speaking at the conference, but who else is speaking at the conference? I want to know, were they hand selected by you? And if so, what about them draws you to them enough to ask them to speak at our conference?
Oh my gosh. So the fact that I could ask someone and they would say yes is just like so humbling to me. And I'm thrilled and blown away by these speakers this year. I do have personal history with each one of them, and I did hand select them and pick them and prayed over them, and God just gave me their names and, just impressed their name upon my heart and was just like them. And it was really cool because this year we're going to talk a little bit later, and you're going to talk to Jackie a lot about the vision of this conference, which is refined. And so we had one speaker, and then like a few weeks later, I was like, we need her as well. And then a few weeks later, even just 6 weeks ago, I'll tell you how the last speaker came on board. So first is Carolyn Haas, and she is from Substance Church in Minnesota. She and her husband, Peter Haas, they have been personal mentors to me and my husband, and they are both pastors, and they co-lead a church together. And Matt and I kind of fell in love with them from afar. We read Peter's first book called Pharisectomy. It's hilarious and such a good book. And then his second book called Broken Escalators is a book that I read yearly because it is that good. It is so, so good. And so we read his books, and she had a lot to do with his books as well. But then God just had our paths cross, and we have been friends ever since. We went and visited them in Minnesota and spent some time with them, and we see them at every art conference that we go to. And I just love her. She is so wise, but she's also super practical and genuine and down to earth, and one of the nicest people you'll ever meet ever. So I'm really excited to have her. And then after the conference that weekend, Peter, her husband, is going to be speaking at all of our campuses at church.
After our conference?
Yes.
Okay.
So our conference is the 11th and 12th.
Okay.
And then so the 12th that night, and then the 13th all day, Peter Haas will be speaking.
That's great.
As our guest
So we'll
speaker.
just all get rooms here and stay overnight.
Exactly.
Yes,
like
perfect.
from Friday, Saturday,
Okay.
Sunday.
Perfect.
We're
Yeah.
moving in. Yeah. Second person is Darlene Parton. And like I mentioned, she and Eric were my husband's youth pastors here at East Coast. They actually served here at this church for 17 years as youth pastors, which is pretty impressive. If you know like any like church stats, youth pastors don't stay youth pastoring for 17 years typically because it's a tough gig, but they really poured their heart into this place, and the fruit of it is what's happening now, So then they left in 2005 to go plant their church Shoreline in Destin, and they're doing awesome. It's going really well.
Shout out to Shoreline.
Yeah.
Woo-hoo.
And a lot of their girls are going to come too and spend time with us here, so I'm so excited. Hey, Robbie. All right, Darlene started out, like I said, as my husband's youth pastor, and she kind of turned into my mentor. And then now we're just great friends, and I just love her. So I'm really excited to have her. She, again, is very practical. And so I've asked her to really bring some tools and tips. She's the kind of person where I'll call her and be like, I'm so tired, Darlene. What do I do with this? How do I handle this situation? She's like, oh, wait, I have a tool for this. Let me just take you through a coaching exercise.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, she's amazing. So she's going to bring some stuff like that. She's done a lot of personal coaching. She went to school for it, so she's awesome. And then Chadi Orozco. I can't do that rolling R thing.
Good. You did good.
Yeah, not bad. She blows me away. Like this whole story is just, I'm still wrapping my mind around it because it just reflects God's faithfulness in this process. But Chadi is, she's a creative director from Celebration Church in Jacksonville. So this is the church I mentioned earlier that I went to, the Shine Conference. So she has worked under pastors Stovall and Carrie Weems over the past 10 years. And I saw her, from the seat attending the conference. She would be on stage at Shine pretty much every year emceeing the conference. And you've been there and seen her. She is hilarious.
Yes, she is.
Super high energy, fun. Just one of those people that it's like, she'd be fun to be friends with, but I'm never, like, our paths are never going to cross, right? Like, how am I going to get to know her? She lives 2 hours away from me and all this stuff. Darlene actually ended up becoming friends with her just from working with Carrie. Like Darlene and Carrie partnered on a couple projects together, and Darlene got to know Chadi. They became friends, but still Chadi was a friend of a friend, right? So I never had even talked to her. I think it was the end of 2018 that Chadi started her podcast called I Cry in Corners. And Darlene let me know about it. She goes, you have to listen to Chadi's podcast. It's a creative church podcast, but the content is just amazing. So I started listening, and it blew me away. Every time I was just resonating with everything she was saying, and it was so helpful for ministry and creativity, and it was awesome. So I actually private messaged her on Instagram, Chadi, to say thank you so much for doing the podcast. I love it. When people pour their hearts out like that, they need encouragement.
Right.
Like, you think that they're getting all these accolades and this like feedback, and they're really not.
Right.
And so I try my best to just, when I have that thought in my heart, to be like, encourage her to actually follow through and do it. And she wrote me back instantly and was like, thank you so much for encouraging me. I'm sitting here crying in my office because I'm just thinking, like, is this really helping anyone? And it was just one of those moments where I was like, come, are you serious? It's amazing. I love it.
Was she crying in a corner?
Probably in the corner of her office. That would be so appropriate. Yeah, so we talk back and forth rarely, but still never met, never really were like, we'll meet. So in March of this year, so just a few months ago, Darlene invited me and 2 other girls to this place in Montana called The Refuge for women and people in ministry, but this was a girls' trip. And Darlene was hosting it, and she handpicked me and Chadi and this other girl, Victoria. And so we ended up spending a week in Montana, me and Darlene and Chadi and Victoria, and it was one of the best weeks of my life. It was we laughed, we cried, it was just fun. And then after that, while we were there too, she told me that my Instagram was awful and that I needed to learn how to use it, and that if I didn't start posting regularly, she was going to unfollow me, because she started following me in Montana, and then she's like, I'm going to unfollow you if you don't do better at this.
What was so bad about your Instagram
I'm just
account?
bad at it. Like, I never post, and I don't know what to post, and I think it was more like my lack of posting than like what I was posting. So she helped me. She like taught me some ropes, and
maybe you need an assistant to
I really
post
do.
Instagram stuff for you. If anyone's listening,
I was going to ask you if you wanted to do it.
Oh gosh, no, I don't know anything about social media.
You're probably worse at social media than I am.
Oh, than anyone listening. I don't even know how do I have headphones on right now and a mic? I don't even know what I'm doing right now.
Yeah, so I'm going to need help with that if anyone does want to help me with that. But I am doing better because I don't want Chadi to unfollow me. So I've been trying to be more consistent.
That's the goal.
It is.
That is the goal.
So, we became friends, but still, like, we're not in each other's lives. And she would be one that I would never ask to be at our, like, she was beyond the scope for me. You know what I mean? Like, you think of I would never ask Christine Kane to come to our conference.
I don't know why.
I know. You have more loftiness than I do. But I just have a reality.
I'm lofty. She's reality.
Exactly. But I'm like, seriously, Christine Kane is not going to come.
Why not?
Well, not right now. Maybe in the future, whatever. So Chadi was like that in my mind. Like, there's no way. She's so busy. She was actually starting to do these creative church conferences and go all across the United States this year. And I just never would have thought to ask her. So she texts me randomly, but not randomly, 6 weeks ago. And she goes, and to backtrack, this was a time where we had just moved twice. We moved twice this past summer, and we had just finished our second move. And I was so tired and so drained of like inspiration. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, it's July and our conference is in October. I have A, no idea what I'm going to say. I have B, no idea like the content of the other stuff that I need to plan. And I'm just feeling like, junk, like, am I even called to do this? All those thoughts that you start going down that trail. And it was in that moment that she texted me and she goes, hey, I want to come to your conference. And I'm like, wait, what? You want to just come? I'm like, she goes, well, Shine, they just not canceled Shine, but they brought it to an end and they weren't doing it yearly anymore. And she goes, and I realized I don't have a women's conference to go to this year. And I just want to come to yours and you're only 2 hours away from me. And I know Darlene's speaking and I would just love to come support you. And I'm like, Chadi, if you're coming, A, you're going to do something there because you're like, I'm not going to not have you do something. And she goes, I'll do anything you want. She's like, I will literally like serve anywhere you need. Aww. And she's like, how do I sign up? I'm like, okay, so I'm signing you up and I'm going to have to pray about this. So good night and thank you. And I put my phone down and I start crying. And my husband's like, what is wrong with you? I said, God just showed me that he is working on this conference even when I can't. Like, I could not work on it all summer. And I felt like if I'm not working on it, it's not going to happen, And it was that moment where he's like, I am working on this behind the scenes. All you have to do is rest and trust me. And so my initial thought, because all I've seen Chadi really do is MC stuff, and she's great and awesome and hilarious, But like immediately I thought, she needs to speak. She has so much in her to share. Listening to her podcast, she is just like a well of information and inspiration. And she has so much in her. She also just came out with a book called Nomad, which is one of the best books I've ever read as well. And so I texted her back the next day and I was like, hey, I don't know if this is too much to ask, but would you want to speak and like do one of the sessions? And she wrote back and said, I can't believe you're asking me to do this. Everywhere I go, people just want me to be funny. And they don't think that I have it in me to speak. And the fact that you're asking me to do this is such like a confirmation to me that God has called me. And I'm like, Chadi, what? You know, it was just like one of those ridiculous moments where you feel like you're just, I don't know. It was crazy. Not in reality. And so it was, yeah, it's going to be awesome. I can't wait for her to come and share. And
God showed up, right? To meet a need, telling you, rest, I'm working behind the scenes, and giving her more confirmation in her identity and who she is in him, and not what everyone thinks. Oh, I'm more than just a funny girl.
Yeah.
I have something more to say.
Yeah.
I love it.
It's amazing.
God is so faithful.
Yep.
Well, hey, speaking about the conference, let's just tell the ladies that are listening, and thank you for listening, to how do they register? Where do we go? Is it eccc.us/sisterhood?
That's where you go.
And they can register today and get their tickets. And don't delay, ladies.
That's right. It's $55 until October 1st. So September 30th, make sure you sign up by then. Else it goes up $10. But seriously, for $65, even if you have to wait, you are getting a 2-day conference. You're going to be getting 2 special gifts that will be surprises. You will also be getting a after party with amazing food and refreshments and fun.
Always.
And lunch the next day is included. Water, coffee, like it's going to be awesome.
And listen, ladies, every time we gather, women experience healing, freedom. They discover their purpose. They just have this peace. And, why not come? Experience it for yourself. Go to eccc.us/sisterhood and register today.
That's right.
So, Jessica, for women who have come to the previous conferences, can they expect anything new or different at this one?
Yeah. So in the past, last year, it's been 18 months since we've done one of these, which is crazy because we did March 2018 was the last one we did. Oh. And in the past, we used Propel Women's video curriculum. So this is Propel is a movement that Christine Kane started. It's incredible. It's all about women in leadership. And we use their curriculum as a base. And then we've added live content around that. So this year, we actually aren't using anything from Propel. We aren't using any video teaching whatsoever. It's all going to be original, all live. We're going to have like little video elements, but none of the teaching is going to be via video. And that was huge and something that I actually had no faith for because I'm like, it's going to be years before we can get away from that. It was a very helpful tool, but it was like, okay, now I actually feel like we have so much content. We could make this a 3-day thing.
Do you remember when you started the time?
Sorry.
Don't get me singing, girl.
Sorry.
Do you remember Soap? When you started Soap.
Yeah.
Cindy Holtzberger's house.
Right.
And you had said, again, this was back when you were kind of identifying, am I going to rise up? This was, I think, part of your... Oh my gosh,
it was the first thing that I did. But after the announcement thing, Soap is a women's Bible study, and I had attended a Soap group at Darlene's church and saw kind of how simple it was to do. And it was something that I came back and told Jackie. We were doing training for half marathons and marathons at the time, and so we would have lots and lots of hours in the morning to run together.
Jeevers.
Right, a little bit. And so I had come back from Destin, and I told her, I went to this Soap group, and I think I could maybe start one.
You did.
So that was the first thing that I started. That was the first thing I ever led by myself.
That was amazing.
Yeah.
And
awesome.
Soap it runs to this day. There's several small soap study groups.
Yeah.
But then also I wanted to mention Propel. When you started Propel Women, you were like, this is how you introduced it. I mean, you were very good at it.
No idea what
I'm about to say. Don't worry. I'm
scared.
Whoever was there will remember this. Okay. You're like, well, I thought it was easy. I could just put in a video and push play. How easy is that?
Right.
So I feel like from there, that's when we started with the conferences. We still pushed play on the video. And now you're like, all right, I'm going to push play on myself now. We're moving away. God's pushing play on me.
That's right.
So I'm just super excited about this conference. And I'm going to throw probably a tough question out at you, but I'm sure you can handle it.
Okay.
let's say I'm a woman. I'm new to the area. East Coast is not my home church. Heck, I don't even go to church. I don't even hang out with women because I've just been burned so much. Why should I even come to this conference?
So first of all, you've been burned by women. Welcome to the club. It's it's typical. Women can be petty and catty and all those things that are stereotypical about us, but we can always also be great friends and have community and get along and get over ourselves. So I've been there too. I grew up not really having a lot of good, strong female friendships. And through sisterhood, I have more friends than I've ever had in my life. And it's not based on, really, it's based on kingdom purpose. Like, we are all friends because we are going after the same goal, and that is getting people to know Jesus, Right. And so when you have a goal like that around your friendship, you fight for it. Yeah. You work through the hard things, and there's purpose behind it. So don't let that stop you. That's just the enemy trying to keep you isolated. Yeah. And it says in the Bible somewhere, a man who is isolated rages against all judgment, all wise judgment, and all wise counsel. So don't let yourself be isolated. This place is for you. Sisterhood is for you. East Coast as a whole is one church with many locations. I like to say that we are one house with many rooms, but we are still one house. And this is an exciting time of the year because this is where we gather together as one sisterhood, all in one location. But it's also very much for our community. So we want to be Brevard's Women's Conference. Like, we want other women from other churches and the teachers that teach at our schools and all those people to come too. This is a place that we are creating for you. If you are a woman, you are sisterhood. It doesn't matter whether you go to church or whether you come to our church. Like, it so doesn't matter. This is for all women.
I like that. That's a good answer. I hope women can feel comfortable to be met right where they're at in a non-stuffy and a non-judgmental environment at this conference.
Yeah, me too.
So I have to bring up this factoid about you that you have shared on several previous occasions, so I'm not outing you.
No, you're not.
One of the things on your personal list of I'm never going to do this was to never marry a pastor. Well, we know that never panned out for you as you married Pastor Matt. So not only did you marry a pastor, but you recently became one yourself. Pump the brakes, sister. What? What is God doing to you,
so funny,
through
Jeanne.
you, and for you through all of this? I mean, I believe your story is worth sharing to some who may be listening and thinking, oh, she's been a pastor for years. She grew up in church. This is her calling. This stuff comes easy for her. That's why she speaks, because she's a pastor. But, I mean, just from what you've been saying earlier, this is not farther from the truth. Would you agree?
Oh, for sure, 1,000%. Like I shared in the beginning, I felt like I was supposed to marry my husband and support him, but like years ago, but I didn't feel like I had that individual calling. And I have to say, I didn't feel like I was missing anything. I felt like that was my calling for that season. And I wouldn't change anything about the timetable. Sometimes I'm like, did I take too long to get a clue? Like, was I living in fear for a really long time? And I do believe that fear drove a lot of my thought process, but I do know that God wastes nothing. And he did a lot through me to refine me, to get me to the place where I was even ready to hear his voice during that time. So I'm not saying I missed anything then, but I will say I didn't see this coming.
Right.
I did not want to marry a pastor for lots of reasons that I actually shared at our last conference in March of 2018. And I think that video is online, or we can link to it somewhere. But I had a preconceived notion about what a pastor's wife should look like. And I didn't really want to be that. And I thought that there'd be things that I would be expected to do, like possibly play an organ, which I just I didn't know how to do that, nor was I wanting to learn that. And so I just had I thought that also to be a pastor, you had to be poor, because just from my personal experience, I have family members who are in the ministry who have always really struggled. They've led these teeny tiny churches, and they just always seem to not enjoy it and not like it. And I just didn't really want any part of that, what I perceived to be that. And God obviously changed that thought process in me, and my hesitancy and all that stuff. So that's just a whole nother story for a whole nother day. But I am not a naturally gifted speaker. I'm like stumbling over my words right now. How wonderful. I don't
You're doing
enjoy
a great job, Jessica.
I don't enjoy getting up on stage and speaking to people.
Well, we enjoy you getting up on stage
Thank
and
you.
speaking.
But I know the voice of God, and I know what he's asked me to do, and I know that to do something different right now in this phase of my life would be disobedient, and I'm not willing to do that. So I don't pretend to be polished and perfect. I am very upfront with the fact that this isn't my favorite thing or first choice to be doing, but I know what God has asked me to do, and I am like not going to be swayed from it, and I'm not going to let fear rule, and I'm just going to do it afraid, like Joyce Meyer said. So
that.
yeah. Yep.
Right. Well, Jessica, I'm so grateful that you have been so open and honest with us today, and I really appreciate that about you. And
Thanks,
I
Jeanne.
believe it just will allow others to feel as though they can be open and honest as well and come to the Flourish Refined conference.
That's right.
And so thank you for joining me today. It's been a real treat. I've learned so much about you and this conference and this episode than I ever thought I would, and I hope our listeners did too.
Thanks, Jeannie. Love you so much.
Hey, ladies, you're invited to Flourish Refined, a 2-day event with worship, live teachings, and a space created specifically for us to grow together as women. Join us on October 11th and 12th at our Merritt Island campus. Lunch and snacks are provided. Our lineup of dynamic speakers includes Pastor Darlene Parton of Shoreline Church in Destin, Florida, Pastor Carolyn Haas of Substance Church in Minneapolis, Minnesota, author Chari Orozco of Celebration Church in Jacksonville, Florida, and our very own Pastor Jessica Stallbaum. Listen, ladies, every time we gather, women experience healing, freedom, they find their purpose, and they experience peace. Why not come and experience it for yourself? Go to eccc.us/sisterhood and register today. Ladies, once again, if you are a woman, you are sisterhood. Until next time.
Thanks for listening to the East Coast Sisterhood podcast. For the latest details on all things sisterhood, visit us on Instagram and Facebook at East Coast Sisterhood or on our website at eccc.us/sisterhood. And never forget, you are sisterhood.